All right, thanks everybody for joining another edition of Free Training Thursday. Today we are going to be discussing how to add new users to our AbacusLaw program and also how to secure what those users can and cannot do and what they can and cannot see in the system. As usual, I have my colleague Amanda on the line as well, and she will be reading out your questions to me at the end of our session today. So make sure you use the chat box or the question box there in your GoToMeeting window so we can address those for you at the end. Just by show of hands, can you let me know that you can see my AbacusLaw program and my mouse moving around real quick? Just click that little hand raising button there if you can. All right, thank you very much. And so I can assume then, since you did that, you can obviously hear me okay. So we will go ahead and jump right in. So in AbacusLaw, you obviously have the ability to have multiple users. Everybody should know that by now. And we can see those users by going into File, Setup, User Manager. Okay, this is an administrative area of the program. So usually if you are messing around in the User Manager section, if you have access to it, you're probably an admin inside of AbacusLaw, so that's a good thing. We don't want to have everybody granted access to this area, just in case. But once we get into that user manager, we can actually see a list of all the people that have access or maybe potentially inactive in our system. Okay, and we can actually see if they're currently in the system as well. If you look here, I've got Sally Jones, and then I have myself, Scott Heist. Notice how Sally is not listed as being in the system. And me, I am listed as being in Practice Manager. Okay, so that's a good place to go if you just want to see who's in the system and who's not. Okay. Now, you'll notice inside of this User Manager, we have some buttons here along the right side. Okay. You can only have active the amount of licenses that you have purchased from Abacus Next. So if you have 5 licenses purchased, you can have 5 active people. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So when you add a new person, watch what happens if I try and add someone when I already have all of my license active. It actually gives me a little message here that says you have reached your limit of number of licenses, and it tells you the number to call if you need to increase that. So that being said, it's quite possible maybe Sally's no longer with the firm, or maybe she's moved to part-time or something like that, so we don't need to have her active anymore. So if that's the case, I can actually just click on Sally's name there so that I'm highlighting it. And then I can click this deactivate button on the right side. And that will basically put her in a deactivated state so that I can now use that license for an active user. Okay, so I'll go ahead and say yes there. Notice how Sally is now removed from my list, okay? But if I need to see everyone, active and deactivated people, I have a button down here that says Show All. And you'll notice I've got quite a few from past trainings that are also inactive. Okay. So now that I've freed that license up, I can click this Add button in the top right corner. And now I'm able to go in and enter in my new users' information. So I can just put in my normal names here. First, middle is not required, but you do need to have first and last in there. Let's see, Brian, we'll say Brian Smith, how about that? And then you should also put in an email address as well, okay? Don't forget to do that. And that should be an actual working email address because Abacus, as some of you may know, does have Outlook integration and email integration capability. So the system does actually utilize that email address. So don't put in a, just kind of like a random address there. Make sure that it is accurate. Okay. And then once you enter in that information and you click that OK button, it takes you into the user preferences for that person. And this is where, as an admin, you can create their user ID, which is usually just their initials. You can get as creative as you want there, but you only have 3 characters to work with, so just keep that in mind. And then you can also add a password for that person. Now, again, Abacus does not require you to have a password. You don't lose any functionality if you choose not to have a password. But to create one for a user, this is where you do it, okay? So I would just put in my password for that user there, or maybe potentially tell my user to go in and create their own password, okay? And then everything else, it kind of just depends on, who you're setting this up for. Usually, bar number, the startup window, and the checkboxes along the right side, those will usually be handled by the user themselves, unless you have a specific way you like it set up for each of your employees, okay? But once you have that information in there, click that done button in the bottom right corner, okay? And if you have accounting enabled as well, it will also ask you to enter in a timekeeper rate for this user, just in case you're an hourly billing firm. If you have one, go ahead and just put it in. That's fine, okay? And then just click done there, okay? If you don't have accounting, that won't pop up. Or if you're maybe a contingency firm or a flat fee firm, just ignore it and just hit the done button. Okay, so there we go. Now we see Brian Smith right there at the top of our list, okay? One thing you should always remember when you are adding a new user is by default, they are automatically an administrator, okay? So you need to work it into your normal user creation workflow that the second you add that person to the system, you immediately adjust their security profile to whatever it needs to be, like attorney or paralegal or whatever, calendar clerk. Because if you are listed as an administrator, you have the keys to the kingdom. You can access every single part of the system. You can delete records. You can add records. So, become familiar with your security profile so what some people should do and what some people shouldn't. So if Brian here is my calendar clerk, I can just go ahead and highlight Brian's name in my list, click the security profile button down below. That's going to pull up a list of the canned security profiles that come with the system. Notice you do have the ability to add security profiles and edit permissions, okay? But you need to find the security profile that best suits that person and click done. Okay, now they're inside of that security profile and will only be able to do what that profile allows. So how do we see what the profile actually allows? Well, every administrator should go through this process and actually look at these security profiles so that they can become familiar with them. But all you really have to do is just click that security profile button, okay? And on each one of these, with the exception of administrator, because you cannot edit that profile, but for each one of these, for instance, attorney, if I want to see what case permissions an attorney can have in this system, all I have to do is highlight it, click the edit button, and notice I have an option to view my case management permissions. Okay, and it's basically a series of checkboxes. Okay, if it's checked, they can utilize that feature. If it's not checked, they cannot utilize it. Okay, so it's kind of like a light switch, right? It's either on or it's off. So for instance, under general settings, notice that anybody in the attorney profile is not allowed to view other people's private records, okay? Notice the drop-down menu at the top of this window as well, okay? There isn't just a general settings section. You've got a whole slew of different areas you can modify permissions for. So let's say I don't want our attorneys to be able to delete notes, okay? Well, I just go into the notes section, okay, and I can uncheck that box. Okay, and now the attorneys or anybody in that grouping won't be able to delete name notes or delete matter notes, okay? So you want to go through, again, like I said, go through those profiles, become familiar with them so that you will, have a better understanding of what groups people should be in your firm, okay? Read only, if you're just trying to give someone visual access to your cases, but they don't have any editing capabilities, read only is a default profile that we put in there that basically just gives them view privileges, okay? So get to know these profiles very well so you know who needs to go where, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just cancel out of this, and that takes us back here into our user manager. So taking what people can view and what they can't one step further, we can talk about what we call the ethical wall. There are a lot of different scenarios in a law firm setting where you would want to utilize our feature, the ethical wall. If you bring in contract attorneys for just a single case and you don't want them to see other cases in your system, or maybe you're a firm that does multiple practice areas and you have attorneys in the office that there may be some sort of conflict going on. So you may want to lock down that data. So we can utilize the ethical wall for that. Now we got to get out of the user manager to get to that section. Okay, so you'll want to go back to your main menu here, your main screen, and then up in that top left corner, when you click File, back inside of our Setup menu, we have a section called System Options. If you go into System Options, you have a tab there, the second tab, called Features. And inside of Features, 4 down on the list, you've got the ethical wall. You need to turn this on in order to use it. So you have to click the little gear button there to the right, okay, and make sure you click the checkbox for Enable Ethical Wall. Now below that, you've got 2 options as far as what types of security you want to set for your ethical wall. Viewing privileges optional is the default setting when that feature is turned on. And as you can see there, it does not set default viewing privileges, but the person creating the matter can actually set individual privileges at that time for who can see it and who can't. Okay, if it's set to mandatory, then that requires you to do it right then and there when you are creating that matter. So I say most people actually choose the second option, viewing privileges optional. Okay, but once we click Done, now that feature is going to be turned on. Okay, I can click Done inside of my System Options. And what you're going to notice now on your matter screens, we open up a matter. And I'll just open up a random case here. How about Doe v. Gates? What you're going to notice in the top right corner of your matters is a little padlock, okay? And that padlock, as you can see here, that padlock, if it is unlocked, then that means that matter is viewable to everybody, okay? But if I click this padlock, now I have the people who are active inside of my user list. I can see them here on the Cannot View Matter section on the left. But now I can start picking the people that I want to be able to access this matter. So if I don't want Brian to be able to access this matter, then I just need to move Scott over. Okay, so now Scott is the only person who can view this matter out of our users in our system. Okay, so if I click Done, and you can do this in mass. So if you have tons of users and you just want to have one person left off the list, notice this little the button with the double arrow that moves everybody over into the viewing list, and then you can just click on one person and move them back. Okay, but once I have that, the people in my list appropriately, I can click Done, and that now locks that matter. Okay, notice I have that padlock on there. So if I'm looking at this matter, that means I am definitely one of the people in the list. Okay, so that's the ethical wall. Again, a very, very handy feature. I see it used quite often nowadays. Now, especially nowadays with the just the growing need to secure our data, secure our case information, and stuff like that. This is a really great feature to help you do that. So the takeaways from today's session are: when we are adding a user, we're always doing that underneath our user manager inside of our file setup list. We also need to get to know our security profiles. You can access them here inside of this list by clicking Security Profile. This is also where you apply the security profile to a particular person. Notice I just changed Brian's over to administrator. You can also access security profile lists by going to File, Setup, Security. Okay, it's the same list there. Get to know this list. Highlight them, click Edit, Case Management Permissions, and look and see what some people can do and what some people can't. Don't be scared to clone some of these and make minor changes and give it like a different name. I see that a lot. There'll be different levels of attorneys. You've got your junior attorneys, you've got your senior attorneys. So maybe you have a junior attorney profile and a senior attorney profile. Maybe that senior attorney has more privileges than the junior. So you can do that as well. Okay. And then the final thing that we discussed is inside of our system options, file setup, system options. And that is our wonderful ethical wall that you can find on the features tab. Don't forget to turn that on, and then you're able to lock down your matters. So that concludes the webinar. So we'll go ahead and get to the questions, and I'll turn it over to Amanda.
All right, thank you, Scott. I will just give it a minute for some questions to come through. Yeah.
Also, while we're waiting for questions to come in, if you're looking at those security profiles, you might have noticed this. I know we were just talking about AbacusLaw today and not Abacus Accounting, but since we have time, I'll bring it up. Underneath your security menu, where you have those security profiles, notice the edit option. Also, in addition, to having case management permissions, also has accounting permissions and accounting reports accessibility. These are really important for people on the accounting side because, sometimes not everybody wants to know what everybody makes. Sometimes we want to lock down productivity reports for certain people, stuff like that. Okay, so you can do that there as well. Just because you set up a user in AbacusLaw, that does not mean that they are set up as a user in Abacus Accounting. Okay, it will automatically create a timekeeper code for that person with their rate and stuff like that, but it does not automatically add them as a user inside of the accounting program. So you need to make sure if you are using the accounting program, I'll go ahead and just open that just so you can see it, but you do need to make sure that inside of accounting you go to File, Setup, User Manager there as well, and to add that user accessibility. And that does not take up another license, just so you know. So if you have, like for instance, I have 2 licenses, and I added Brian as my new user in AbacusLaw. If I need to add that person in Abacus Accounting, that's perfectly fine. It's not going to take up a license.
All right, well, it looks like you've been incredibly thorough because we don't have any questions coming through. We can give it one more minute, or we can wrap this up and give everybody some time back.
Yeah, let's give it one more minute. Maria, I'm seeing your hand is raised, so we'll give it a minute just in case maybe you're typing something.
All right, Maria would like you to know that she was just playing with the buttons and did not know how to put her hand down at the time.
No worries at all.
In that case, I think we can wrap it up unless you have anything to add, Scott.
Nope, I think that's it for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you again next Thursday.